I'm Rena Ferrero. Most of you probably won't recognize me. I'm new to the Santa Rosa Quilt Guild. I joined in the winter of 2019, and then by February we were all asked to stay home for 2 years. But now we're back, and I wanted to get a little more involved, so I volunteered for the Block of the Month committee. Kay Hartman and I are co-chairs for the committee, and this year we decided we'd like to focus on triangles. So all of the blocks we've selected for this year include mini triangles. And often those triangles are half square triangles. So today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how to make half square triangles. Our block for January had 4 half square triangles, each of the same color. This was the Ohio Star. The block for February was the flock block. It had 2 half square triangles of the same color, and then 8 smaller half square triangles of the same color. And when you're making 8 or 2, of course we want to save time, so I'm going to show you how to save a little bit of time when we're making extra blocks. And then the block for March is going to be the card trick. The card trick has 4 blocks, half square triangle blocks, each of a different color. So if you're going to be making just one of these blocks and only one block of one color, I want to show you how to do that as well. So I'm going to begin with just making one block because that is our block for March. And we're going to start, the instructions ask us to start with a 5-inch block of one color, and then of course we have a 5-inch block of our background fabric. And first we're going to line up or put one block on top of the other. The instructions ask to cut one line from corner to corner. Now I like to add a sewing line in addition to the cutting line. So what I've done is just add that 1/4 inch cutting line right there. Now of course most of you probably won't want to do that. I like to do it especially on this kind of block because it can slip pretty easily. But also, since we're all making blocks to share with each other, it assures that we're going to have that perfect 1/4 inch seam. So I've got my cut line corner to corner and my sewing line, and I'm going to just cut just like that. And then, because I've cut it, I now have a seam that's going to be on the bias. It can stretch very easily. One of my quilting books suggested that I put a pin in the corner. Again, a lot of you won't want to do that. I found that for me, it helped me line up the corners perfectly. I can put my sewing machine needle right in at the beginning, pull out that pin, very carefully stitch, and pull the pin before I get to the end, because that will interfere with the tension on the thread of the machine. And then I've got my seam. Once my block is sewn, I want to press it and set the seam, and then flip it over, press the color fabric to the back. This is very important so that the color seam does not show through onto the background fabric, especially as the quilt blocks and front are assembled. Often that can be very disconcerting to see after you've finished making a quilt. So once we've pressed the block, we're going to trim it up. This is a square grid ruler. It has the ruler across the top and the bottom, and most importantly, this diagonal line from corner to corner. I'm going to line this up on the square And because we want a finished 4.5 square block, I can very clearly see where that 4.5 inch is. Put it down and trim going both directions. Some people don't need to flip it, but I do. And then line up my 4.5 inches perfectly, line up the diagonal line perfectly, and trim. And you can see that the corner of the square and the diagonal line meet perfectly. Square grid ruler, best invention. I did not know they existed until about 6 months ago. The next one I want to talk about for the half square triangle is how to make 2 at a time. So again, we're going to start with our block of color. We're going to lay the background fabric on the top. We're going to draw the line from one corner to the other. And on this one, I like to draw both sewing lines. So I've drawn a sewing line on a 1/4 inch on this side, and then I've also drawn one on the other side, so that I have 2 sewing lines at a 1/4 inch. Then I like to just pin the fabric off to the side a little bit to keep it from shifting while I'm sewing. Again, I want to emphasize I'm fairly new to quilting, so I don't have all the confidence that somebody does who has been doing this a long time. So I like to do these little tricks that make sure my block is going to be as perfect as possible. Then I'm going to take this to my machine and sew down along one of my sewing lines, turn it, and go down the other. And here I've sewn on both sides. The first thing I'm going to do is press this to meld my seam, and then you can see that it's sewn and it's very smooth. Next I'm going to cut on the cutting line. And again, fold this back, press it very firmly. Oops, wrong, right. Fold it back on the color side so that the color does not show through onto the background fabric once we're assembling the blocks. Then I want to use my square grid ruler and again line up that diagonal line and trim it up perfectly. And you can see it's right there in the corner. Perfect. Okay. Then our next one I want to show you is making mini multiple half square triangles. The block for February was the flock block, and it asked for 8 half square triangles. The block we're going to be doing for April is the rosebud, and it also asks for 8 half square triangles, and they're going to be 2-inch, very small little triangles. One thing about doing them in multiples is you can get them more accurately. They're more likely to be the same when they're all cut from the same block. So again, we're going to start with our color block, lay the background fabric on the top, and then I'm going to draw a line from one corner to the other corner, And also, again, draw my sewing lines. So I have a cut line and 2 sewing lines. Then I'm going to do the same, going to the opposite corners, the cut line and the 2 sewing lines. And then I've added the little pin for my security. And take it to the machine. I'm going to sew down both sides and down both sides of my 2 cutting lines. This is where this gets very interesting. If you flip it over to the back, you'll see that these lines intersect, and you can see very nicely where they do. When we cut this block, we're going to cut, instead of diagonally, our first cut is going to be across. It's going to be sort of like cutting a pie. You just make lots of cuts. This first one is going to be right through where those stitching lines intersect. That will give us a nice straight line. Then we can cut the same way again. Line up your lines. Line that up exactly so that both of those stitching lines intersect. And then very carefully cut right through. Now the rest of the pieces, you can see, still have the cutting lines. So we can cut through those. The next thing we of course need to do is set the stitching and then open it up so that the color fabric is to the back and press. Now when we press, if you want, you can stack them while you press them. There's no such thing as pressing too much to get nice, flat, little perfect half square triangles. Then of course we want to trim them up using our half square grid. And we're good to go with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 little half square triangles. Hopefully this helps you with constructing half square triangles and perfect piecing. Thank you.